7.6. Apply the sine and cosine ratios. Vocabulary. Sine and cosine. Sine and cosine are trig functions, or trig ratios, for acute angles in a right triangle the sine function is opposite over hypotenuse. The cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Of course, you remember when we say opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse, we're talking about the leg lengths of the triangles. All right, angle of elevation. Angle of elevation is when you are looking up. So let's draw a nice light ball here. When you're looking up at an object, the angle your line of sight makes toward that object with a horizontal line is called the angle of elevation. The angle of depression, when you are looking down at an object, let's draw a piece of paper on the floor. If you're looking down at that paper, then the angle your line of sight makes with a horizontal line is called the angle of depression. Okay. Sine and cosine ratios. Let ABC be a right triangle with acute angle A. The sine of angle A and cosine angle A, written SINA in COSA, are defined as follows. The sine equals the length of the leg opposite of A. So, what leg is opposite this angle? BC, over the hypotenuse. Remember, the hypotenuse is always the angle or side across from the right angle. So AC. Cosine then is the one adjacent. Remember that adjacent means hooked onto A. So what side is hooked onto A that is not the hypotenuse? That's AB. And again, the hypotenuse is AC. Okay, next page. Find the sine ratios. Sine of U. What's opposite of U? Well, it's the side WV. What's a hypotenuse of this triangle? It's the side UW. WV has the value of 16. UW has the value of 34. And then 16 over 34 reduces to 8 over 17. We stick that in a calculator, and it's approximately, remember that's what those wavy lines down here mean, it's approximately 0.4706. Remember, we usually take trig ratios out to 4 decimal places. Okay, what's the sine of W? Sine of W is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite of W is 30. Hypotenuse again is 34. 30 over 34 reduces to 15 over 17, which is 0.8824. Find the cosine. cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the cosine of S, which one is adjacent? Well, which one is not the hypotenuse that's hooked on to S? So that is 45 over hypotenuse again, 53. And that is 0.8491. What's the cosine of R? R would be 28 over 53 again, 0.5283. Okay, go ahead and do this checkpoint. So you're going to have 4 answers for this, or actually 8, because you're going to find both fraction and decimal for each angle. Alright, and then start the video again when you get through. Okay, example 3. Now, a lot of times students get a little bit confused about what trig is good for. And remember, it's good if we can find a unknown side length if we have an angle in one of the sides. So, here we have a basketball court. And you're walking diagonally. And they want to know how far that is. So they measure the angle, and they know that one of the side lengths is 94. So here's our solution. We can write the sine of this angle, 62. And remember SOHCAHTOA? Sine of this angle equals opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite is 94, hypotenuse is x. Now, how do I get x by itself? Well, I can multiply both sides by x and then divide by sine of 62. So, I can say that this is here's my intermediate step here, and then divide by the sine of 62. So 94 over sine 62. And that would be about 106.5. So the distance of the walk is about 106.5 feet. Now, a lot of times up here, when they don't tell you what to use, some people may be saying, hey, how do I know how to use, when to use sine, when to use cosine, when to use tangent? So let's talk about that for a moment. What angle do they give you? 62. What do we want to find for 62? Well, we want to find the hypotenuse. That throws tangent out because tangent doesn't have hypotenuse in it. So we can't solve for hypotenuse using the tangent. Well, how do we choose between sine and cosine? Well, what other number do they give us? They give us 94. What is 94 in relation to 62 degrees? That would be opposite. So which one do we need to use? Right, sine, because it gives us what we have, and it also lets us calculate what we want. Okay, find the hypotenuse using an angle of depression. Roller coaster. You're at the top of a roller coaster 100 feet above the ground. Now, I know this is not true for me because I would never be on a roller coaster, especially 100 feet from the ground. So this story probably must be about you. The angle of depression is 44 degrees. About how far do you ride down the hill? So, remember the angle of depression is your eyes looking down at something down here in a horizontal line. So this would be called the angle of depression. So the sine of 44 is opposite, which is the 100, over the hypotenuse, which is the x. So 100 over x. Now we need to multiply both sides by x to get rid of the x underneath. So sine of 44 times x equals 100. Now we need to divide by the sine of 44. Okay, if you haven't picked up on this trick, if the x is underneath, well, actually, a better word for that would be in the denominator of the fraction, you can just switch these two values and it comes up with the proper equation. So now x equals 94 divided by, put sine of 44 in your calculator, which it should be 0.8829, and you get 106.5. Okay, and oops, I wrote down the wrong number here. I was looking at the last problem. So let's take this out. So 100 divided by sine of 44 is 144 feet down. So there we go. Okay, next. Okay, see if you can do these two checkpoints and then start the video again when you're done. Okay, example 5. Find the leg lengths using an angle of elevation. A railroad crossing arm that's 20 feet long is stuck with an angle of elevation 35. Find the lengths x and y. So we need to find x first, or I guess we don't, but that's the way they do it. So what is x? Let's see. What do we have? We have 35 as our angle, and then x is that opposite or adjacent or hypotenuse. Well, x is opposite. And then we have the number 20 is our hypotenuse, isn't it? So opposite over hypotenuse, what is that? That's so, isn't it? So we need the sine of 35. Okay, so sine of 35, the opposite is x, and then our hypotenuse is 20. Multiply both sides by 20. Get 20 times the sine of 35, or 35, and that should equal 11.5. Okay, step 2, find y. Okay, what is y from what we have? Well, y is adjacent. It's hooked on to the 35 degrees. So we're going to need to use cosine this time because it's C-A-H. Cosine is adjacent over the hypotenuse. So the cosine of 35 equals y over 20. We can multiply both sides by 20 again. And that is 16.4. Okay, example 6. We skipped this section. I'll do it with you a little bit later. At least this year, 2012. If you're listening to this another year, go ahead and do it. Well, I guess you can't because I'm not going to do it either. So, let's just mark this off. We'll talk about that stuff later. Okay, on checkpoint, go ahead and do 4, but you don't need to do 5.